Yeah, Daniel. Yep, good to be back and doing some things here too for you. Uh, I've I've been the deputy director in Kansas for 7.5 years, and now just a part-time counselor. And my boss Terry Bennett was nice enough to let me present this with the Nebraska PTAC. I've been working with SAM, System for Award Management. I'll explain what that is in a minute. Since it started out in 2012 and was involved with, there are about 5 of us nationwide with our national association that tracked all the things going on with the SAM program. And at various times I've served as a liaison with from our national association to the General Services Administration, GSA, that runs the SAM program. So I've been around a long time. So we'll try to get you some information on the registration and why do you need to be concerned about doing a SAM registration. Well, first, let's talk about what SAM is. It's a System for Award Management. We always have to have an acronym. People will call it SAMS. It's not Sam's Club. It's the federal government's database of government contractors. The registration requires a lot of information about your business for the contracting officers to make decisions on contracting with you to work with them. So it's the good part of SAM is this is where your payment information is stored. So when you do win a contract and finish one, this is where they pay you. So when Daniel was talking about invoicing, the invoice goes through and you're paid because the information is stored in SAM. You need to be registered in SAM because the federal acquisition regulations, which contracting officials have to abide by, it's only a couple thousand pages of 6-point type, says offers and quoters are required to be registered in SAM at the time an offer or quotation is submitted. So that's the reason that you need to do that. There are very few exceptions to that. Sometimes if you are selling, somebody's using a purchase card, which is just like a credit card, may not have to be there. Always remember, SAM registrations are free and it's at sam.gov. If you go in and do a Google search, you may end up at one of the companies that wants to charge you $599, $699. It's free. There's assistance from the Nebraska PTAC to get you there. So, don't pay for something that you don't need to. What you need to start to get together and complete prior to starting that registration is a lot of information. So if you intend to be an LLC or corporation, then you need to be registered with the Secretary of State. And the address used in the registration should be the business address. And although a lot of businesses get started as an LLC or corporation using maybe their attorney's address or your home address, we'll talk about why you need to have the business address in here. And then you need to have a tax ID number if you're an LLC or corporation. Sole proprietorships, though, have the option. You can obtain a tax ID number or use the owner's social security number, whichever you want to do. So if you have the LLC or corporation registered, or you're going to be a sole proprietor, and you do not have to be an LLC or corporation to be a government contractor. There are plenty of them that are sole proprietors. You just have to decide how it is that you want to run your business. So then you can contact Dunn's, Dun & Bradstreet, to obtain a number to be used in the registration. And don't get excited that you're going to have to pay a lot of money for this. The address I have there, and I'm sure people at the Nebraska PTAC will be able to provide you that same information, is where you can go to get your DUNS number for free. The government has already paid for that number to be issued to government contractors. The one thing that you want to keep in mind is if you register now, you still have the DUNS number. In the next year or so, you will see a change coming, and it's going to be a unique ID that's going to be assigned by the SAM system. They have DUNS no longer is going to have the contract to do that, but that is supposed to be a seamless process. So you shouldn't have to do anything to move forward with that. Again, the address for DUNS, the government's looking for you to provide the physical address in DUNS. They want to be able to know where you're at. There are various inspections, various things that happen that the government may need to come to your physical address. If you're producing, say you're producing parts for the military, they will want to come inspect them. If you're applying for some of the socioeconomic groups, Daniel was just talking about an upcoming HUBZone program. If you're in the HUBZone program applying for that, that's an SBA certification, and they will ordinarily come to your facility to make sure that you operate from the address you give. And so there are various reasons that the government may need your physical address. And for a sole proprietorship, because we run into this often, if you're operating your business as a sole proprietor, so if I'm running NAP contracting, when I go in as a sole proprietor, the DUNS number will be issued to NAP, Scott. And that's the way it will show up in all of your SAM registrations. It will not show up as NAP contracting because that's the way the rules and regulations are. Now, if you're an LLC or a corporation, then you will be listed under your business name. And you can do a DBA also, doing business as, so I could have NAP Scott and then under it DBA NAP contracting, but in any searches it will show up as NAP Scott. So big caution here. SAM isn't an instant process by any means. You have to plan your SAM registration. And I put in here 2 weeks. It could be longer than that. You never know what kind of questions may come back. And there's no expediting button. There's no function. They don't have a Prime subscription. They get served as they come. First come, first serve. So you need to plan out in advance. If you think you want to be a government contractor, that's one of the places where we would say you want to start. Get your registration completed before you're finding things you want to bid on, because the things you want to bid on, you might not get the registration done in time to bid on them. So you might have done a lot of work trying to figure out a bid and then find that, hey, it's not available because I don't have my SAM registration done. So you need to plan in advance for this. And so we need to be one of the first things probably that you do is to jump in and get your SAM completed. We're going to talk about how to answer some questions you're going to be asked in the registration process, and we'll talk about some mistakes we see along the line, some things you need to do. So you've gotten your DUNS number, you're ready to go that way. You've got your tax ID number, you've gotten your all of those things that we just talked about. So now you're ready to go in. Now, first of all, understand that this registration process, I do it a lot. I've done hundreds of these, and it will take 45 minutes to an hour to do, depending on how well you're prepared in advance. I'm going to talk about the things that you need to have ready to go in order to use your time best during the process. There is a login.gov that you will be working with, and you will need to register there to start the process. It's kind of like a lot of the other things that you register for. You're going to be putting in information about a password, the email address that you're going to be using for this, and you want to have an email address established that you will use going forward. You can change the email, but it is not an easy process. So give some thought to what email you're going to use. Then you need to also have your cell phone number there, because they will be giving you the security code like we see so often in commercial operations. It can go to a landline, but it can be text to your phone. So you need to have that information ready and to go and do the login.gov account information. But sometimes it looks like you're done with all of the registration preparation when you get done doing that login.gov. Don't let it fool you. You're not done. Excuse me, need to get a little something to drink there. You need to continue to set up an individual user account in the SAM system. So this is what you're going to see here, an individual account. I've had people who go to the system account. Notice I put do not set up a system account. People think that, and I understand the thinking, it's a system account because I'm doing it for my business. The account administrator is an individual account because it's tied to you as an individual, putting your information in here. And if you leave the business, another individual has to take over as the administrator. And if you're running the business, make sure that you are keeping track of all of that information someplace so that when you get ready to do renewals, that person leaves, you can make a transition of your accounts. So the individual account is what you're going to set up. And you're going to go in there and put in information just like the normal accounts that you're setting up commercially. You're going to be putting in information about username, passwords, security questions. Make note of those security questions because there may be a time when you have to make a change and you may have to provide those security questions to the help desk. Just don't set up a system account. I've had to try to get rid of those before, and that's not an easy job. When you get into the SAM system, you've done the login.gov registration, you've gotten the SAM individual account set up. Now you're going to go in and be ready to start the process. In one of the items, we talked about the DUNS information a few minutes ago. One of the first screens you're going to see as you move into the process, and I'm not going to go through every screen. Remember, I said if I do it, it takes 45 minutes to an hour. We're going to talk more about some things to do and not do, and we're not going to focus on every thing that you have to put into the system. If you have some specific questions, please put them in the chat. We'll get to those before the end. I'm sure I have plenty of time left. Again, make sure you know how your DUNS information was put in. So you should get an email back from Dun & Bradstreet with your number and your information. Now, often people will think that they put in street, S-T-R-E-E-T, when in fact it comes back ST, and you don't have to put the periods in, but So make sure you look at that. We often spend time going back to DUNS trying to find out what it is that is not matching up, because this has to exactly match. The business name has to match, the address, the city, the zip code, everything has to match to move forward into the system. We can't get any further than this screen if we don't have the proper information. So we often run into people who have put in their DUNS information, but they don't remember exactly what they put in, and they don't have access to the email that tells them what it was they put in. And so we spend time guessing at that, or we have to try to look it up online, and sometimes what's online doesn't match, and we have to make a phone call to DUNS to establish that. So, you know, that's one of the bits of information to have available when you go to do your registration is your DUNS number. And the same should be true once the unique identifier comes online. So once we have all of that and it matches up with what DUNS has on file, then we can move forward. Another thing that you need to think about, it's better to have thought about it in advance, but when I work with clients, it seems like that's one thing that they pass over is creating, even though I tell them, creating what's referred to as an MPIN, Marketing Partner Identification Number. Don't ask me who came up with that name, but it's exactly 9 characters long. It's not 8, it's not 12, it's 9 characters long. It has to have 1 letter, 1 number, no spaces, no special characters. So it's very specific. And you're going to need to record this, because as you do changes to your SAM registration, SAM is not a static. If there are changes in your business, you need to put that information in. We're going to talk about some NAICS codes. And when we talk about that, those are things you may be adding. You have change of electronic points of contact. A lot of that information you may need to update. And once a year, at least, you have to do a renewal. So you need to record this, because you will need to use the MPIN in the process of doing a renewal. You can reset a MPIN, but it's not an easy process. Just been doing that in the last few days. So make sure that you are recording this information. Taxpayer ID number. You're going to input that. Again, if you're an LLC or corporation, you have to get the employer ID number from the IRS. If you're sole proprietor, again, you have that option to use the Social Security number. My recommendation is you would try to get an ID number, so you put your Social Security number out as little as possible. But you have that option. So you're going to be inputting that information into the system. Okay, this is another of my favorite things. You have to know how the name of your business is listed with the IRS, and not only the name, but the address. This system does not use punctuation, but you have to have an exact match. Just been helping a close relative go through this process of updating his SAM, and it kept getting rejected, because what happens is when we start the process and we submit the SAM registration, the first thing that happens, and I'll talk again about this, but it goes to the IRS to check the information that the IRS has with the information we have input into the system. So if the name doesn't match, the address doesn't match, you'll get kicked out and you'll have to try to figure out where the issue is. And with this relative, he thought he knew exactly what the IRS information was. He has an LLC, but he came to find out after it got rejected about 4 times that IRS had the name of his the name attached to his tax ID number as his personal name, not the LLC. And we've run into this numerous times. Somebody has an address or the name of the business is different than what they think it is. So if you get those tax forms in front of you at the time you're doing the SAM registration, that's the best thing to do. Check it out, see what address, what name is on the tax ID information when it's sent to you. Now, the other thing is that you can have a different address on your taxes than what you have as an address for DUNS. This is checking the information that is in the IRS. It's not cross-referencing to the DUNS number. And I know that people will have their taxes information go to their house. They can have it go to their bookkeeper. So all of those things are fine as long as it matches up with what the IRS has on file. Bank information, again, something that we run into all the time. We tell clients in advance that we're going to need that information, and invariably, if we're helping them with a registration, they'll have to maybe call the bank to get the routing number, try to find their bank account number. It's not as easy as it used to be. You know, some of us don't even hardly have checks anymore. You know, if I have a checkbook, I can look right at the checkbook and see what the routing number is and what the bank account number is. And then we need a phone number for the bank. And all that's because this program is setting up your payments. Once you are successful in getting a government contract, they're setting up your payments so that the money goes to the EFT to your bank account. And so that's the reason for this. There will also be a place where you will put in your address for the money to be sent to you if for some reason they can't electronically send it to your bank. But they want the phone number for the bank so that they can contact them if they have issues getting the money deposited in the bank account. A minute ago, I talked about NAICS codes. NAICS is North American Industry Classification Codes, and it is basically a manufacturer type code for a lot of the things, but it's a way that the Census Bureau has actually set this up, and so it's used to identify your business. And I'll show you in a minute some of the NAICS codes. And NAICS is how it's pronounced. Daniel and I were just talking. Our association is having their training conference this week, our spring training conference. Ordinarily, members of the APTAC community, our Association of Procurement Technical Assistance Centers, would be someplace for about 4 days of training. Of course, COVID, everybody's taking it online, so PTAC counselors will be zoomed out by the time the next Friday comes along, because they started, I believe, on Tuesday this week. I've been taking some of it. I'm only a part-time counselor now. I'm trying to retire, but I'll be doing this part-time for the next year. So it's 4 hours for 2 weeks every afternoon practically, depending on what time zone we're in. So then the NAICS code also is used to decide if your business is a small business. There are special set-asides for small businesses in government contracting, so small businesses don't have to bid against Boeing or Raytheon on every contract. There are contracts that those companies can't bid on because they are only set aside for small business. Contracts under $250,000 are to be set aside for small business if there's a small business that can do the work. So here's what NAICS codes are. They start with a 2-digit number. So these are just some of the industries. You see agriculture starts with an 11, 21 for mining. So you have those. And then I have 4 additional numbers that further identify a business. So here's an example. Excuse me. Metal heat treating has an NAICS code of 332811. Now they're very broad. 332811 might cover a whole variety of other similar type things. And so, excuse me, newer industries, we can't even find NAICS codes yet. So don't be upset if the NAICS code doesn't exactly match up with your business, because that you have to just come as close as you can. And excuse me. I recently had some lung surgery, so sometimes I run out of air here. Okay, so something that you want to do besides just looking at the NAICS codes, and their Census Bureau has a place that you can look those up, and the Nebraska PTAC people can help you with that. You may want to look at solicitations. Daniel mentioned betasam.gov, and presently that's where we go to look for contracting opportunities. And you may want to be looking at solicitations that are in your area to see what NAICS codes the contracting officers are giving to that work, because this is an art, not a science. And they're often, what we think the NAICS code might not be the same NAICS code that a government contracting officer believes. And the NAICS codes that they believe in are the ones that carry weight, not ours. You can put in multiple NAICS codes. You'll have to choose one that where you think you'll be obtaining the major portion of your business. It doesn't really affect your registration, but you do have to choose one that you think you're going to get most of your business from. You can put in multiple NAICS codes, as I said, but don't put in 150 NAICS codes. I saw this not too long ago. A client I was working with, they had 150 NAICS codes. I've seen others that had 100 NAICS codes. You know, there was a company I looked at a while back. They could do everything from running your preschool to flying airplanes and providing propane. What that tells me is that you are just running a front. In other words, you have established yourself with some kind of socioeconomic advantage, because hub zones like Daniel mentioned, service disabled veteran-owned companies, women-owned companies, small disadvantaged businesses, 8A, that are certified by SBA, are all get special consideration and special set-asides, which means their classification of business is the only one that can bid on it. And sometimes people feel like that they can use those special certifications to do anything in the world, and there are rules and regulations that are involved in how much work a business has to do. So you can't, if you're say a woman-owned business, you can't obtain a contract and sell that contract to another company. You are on the line for producing whatever it was you bid on. There's also a product service code or a federal supply class, federal service code that you can put in. It also helps to identify what it is you do. So the product service codes are, if you're selling products, the federal service codes are more if you're in the service industry. So if you're a staffing agency, something like that, you would use those. Here's a interesting thing. So if you're a startup business, you maybe have no sales, but you still have to put in information here. You have to put in at least $1 and 1 employee. But if you're in business, here's what you need to know. Annual receipts. We usually talk about the gross receipts of the business. That includes everything. So you're in the construction business and you have a division that puts up buildings, and you also have a division that's in the sand and gravel business. You don't get to separate those. It's all the annual receipts of that business is what goes into this information right here. Also, all the employees of the business goes in right here. Worldwide, if you put it in there, it translates down into the locations, so you don't have to put it in twice. A couple things to be aware of here is you can see there's no commas. So be sure if you're inputting this information that you check and see what the digits are you put in here, because I've had people who ended up with their business being large when they weren't large because they made a mistake here and put in $55 million instead of 5.5 million. So when you're putting that information in, or somebody's helping you with it, make sure you double check that. Now, I have the NAICS codes that I just talked about. The NAICS code has a size standard assigned. SBA has said anything that has less than this number for annual receipts, so maybe it's $10 million in your category of business and you're in a service business. Anything smaller than that is a small business. So it will tell you, there is a place where it tells you that information. But within this system, it's going to take the NAICS codes that you put in it. It's going to take this information from the annual receipts or number of employees. I'll talk about number of employees in a minute, and decide whether you are a large or small business. And you will see that within the system as you move forward. The number of employees, let's go back to annual receipts. Now this annual receipts, presently you have a choice of averaging the annual receipts over a 3-year period or a 5-year period. It sounds crazy that you have a choice there. Congress made a change a couple years ago and they let it phase in, and so you had a choice of the 3 or 5 year, whichever was more advantageous to your business. What was happening was some small businesses were on the 3-year average were starting to get phased out of the small business area, and they felt that if they had a 5-year time frame to average, that they would be able to stay longer in the small business arena. And so they got Congress to change that. And actually what I talk about down here, a change in regulations, comes into law January 6th next year, and that is to go to 5 years all the time. So presently it's in a transition mode. January next year, you will be averaging over a 5-year period. Now, the number of employees is the number of positions you have during the 12-month period. So they'd look at your payroll if there was a protest that said your business has too many employees. The employees is more in the manufacturing side of things. So the the size standard has two different things going on. There are part of the NAICS codes that are based on the annual receipts. Part of them are based on number of employees. It's basically the manufacturing side that's number of employees. It could be 1,500 employees, could be 1,000, it could be only 100 employees. This number for the annual receipts might be $3 million, or it might be is construction, general construction, 39.5 million. So some pretty good sized companies come under that, and most people think that they're anything less than 100 employees is a small business, but the size standards used by the SBA, and that's what governs this in government contracting, has various ways of measurement. Once you get into SAM, you have the option to check this, and I've circled this. It comes up on a page. It says SAM search authorization. At the SAM search authorization, they ask if you want to include an entity's non-sensitive information. I'm going to tell you to check that box. People uncheck it, thinking that they then will not have people contacting them because they won't know that their registration is there, but that's not true. I can find your registration, so scammers can find your registration. The only thing you're doing here is keeping the contracting officers and the prime contractors who might need your information to try to do business with you from having it readily available. So there's a representations and certifications section of SAM. It's about 34 questions. So they have a lot of information about your business, the ownership. Have you paid your federal taxes? Has anybody that is the principal or has the business been in trouble for fraud or some criminal offense? And the crazy thing is, you will see some of these questions more than once in that 34 questions. And then there's some interesting questions like, are you owned by a foreign government? Are you providing, there are 4 questions about satellite services. Are you providing satellite services? This one I wanted to call your attention to. It's question 22. It asks if you filed all the required equal opportunity compliance reports. Now, depending on the size of your business, you may not have to be in compliance with all the equal opportunity reporting. And so this is a kind of a backwards answer, but I've checked this with government contracting attorneys that I know well. Excuse me. So if you're a new contractor, you're new to government contracting, answer question 22, yes, that you have filed all the compliance reports, your required compliance reports. Because if you're not required to file them, you have complied with the law. And then on question 23, you go down to the third item that says has not had previous contracts subject to the written affirmative action program requirements from the Secretary of Labor, and you check that box. Now, year 2, you're doing your renewal, and you have had contracts that required you to provide the equal opportunity compliance reports, then you have to change this answer. So again, Daniel mentioned BetaSAM, and I'll mention it here because there are things going to be going on in the next couple of months. So we now have a BetaSAM site, and that has the information about bid opportunities, contract performance, federal procurement data system that has history information, wage determinations if you're in construction or service industries, telling you what wages and benefits you have to pay. All that's in a site called betasam.gov. Usually beta means it's a test site. In this case, it's not. It's an actual site. Been up probably 2 years now. But then the SAM registration is at www.sam.gov. This is all going to be combined. May 24th, the SAM site will become part of the BetaSAM site, but the beta will go off of the SAM site. Now, if that isn't confusing enough, I don't know what is. So you're going to be still going to www.sam.gov if you do a registration after May 24th. If you're in the system, it should transfer you over. It shouldn't be an issue. Shouldn't be an issue. I said that twice, and I intended to say it twice. Hopefully everything transfers over in the first part of June. If I was in the SAM system, I would look at my registration and make sure that everything transferred over. I'm just a little skeptical because I have seen some issues with these systems before. And if you've been around transitions of computer systems, you've seen it too. So this is probably what it's going to look like. They put this out as a possible design. You see right now they have they put contract opportunities, contract data, wage determination, assistance listing, which is grant information, and someplace within that you should see the SAM registration information also. That's a possible design. They will be transitioning to the new design in BetaSAM. I believe it's April 26th. So if you go to the betasam.gov site, you'll see what their actual design is going to look like. Dynamic small business search is an area that's maintained by the SBA. It's at the last page of your SAM registration. You'll see the SBA logo, and that gives you an opportunity to go to the Dynamic Small Business Search site to put in information that only a small business can put in. Large businesses will access that to find out information about you, maybe for subcontracting, but this is an opportunity for you. We talked about the NAICS codes being very broad, and this is an opportunity for you to tell the government contracting people, prime contractors, exactly what you do. As a contracting officer told us one day when we were talking about a construction project, he said, the NAICS codes in construction are broad. I want to know, are you the guy that can put the floor in my building, or the guy that can do the drywall, or the guy that can do the ceiling? And you can do that by keywords, and keywords is what we want you to think about, and that's the information to have available prior to your SAM registration. Also, think of this as what someone would use to find your business if they're doing a Google search. So I brought up some information here. Again, what we're looking for is keywords. So this company has architecture, structure, because the contracting officer does a keyword search. And in this particular one, they gave you a lot of information about how they move forward, but the biggest thing is to have the keywords. It may be nice that you began with a charter operation in Seward, Nebraska, but that's not the most important information. The most important information is what it is you do. And so get that information in there for sure. So once you have completed your SAM registration, I talked about the IRS validation. It goes there and it'll take 2 or 3 days for that to happen. And then it is sent to the CAGE code office, commercial and government entity. As part of the Defense Logistics Information Service, they'll give you a 5-digit code that indicates that you are registered in SAM and it identifies your facility. So if you had a facility in Omaha and one in Grand Island and one in North Platte, and you were doing government contracting from all three, you would have a registration for each one of those, and you would have a CAGE code that identifies those business facilities. First you get an email that says your tax information has been sent to IRS for validation. Again, it takes a couple days. Then you should get a second email telling you that it's passed or failed. If it failed, then that's when you need to really start working with your PTAC counselor more and try to establish why that was rejected. And you may have to contact the IRS to see if in fact you have some wrong information. CAGE code, once it gets past the IRS validation, goes to the CAGE code people. 99% of the time, I think 100% now, they're going to send you an email. This is where it's going to come from. CAGE review at DLA. They do need a response, so be looking for this. And they're going to ask you a lot of different questions. They're going to ask you if the person in the electronic point of contact is an owner. Is the email going direct to them? Because they want to communicate directly to a person at the business. They don't want it to be a general email. The phone number, does it get to that person? So they ask a variety of questions. They're going to ask you, so you're in a strip mall and there's 4 other businesses in that strip mall. Are they associated with you? And then they may have found other companies that have similar names. Are any of them associated with you? So there are a whole variety of questions. Again, is the address correct and complete? One of the most important parts of this is you only have 3 days, 3 business days to respond to this. So you get it on Tuesday, you better be getting this back in the 3-day period, because if you don't answer the questions, then they reject it back to SAM. Your information is still there, but you have to go through the login.gov, get into the SAM system, do an update, go through every screen and resubmit it, and they'll send you the questions again. So make sure you're watching for that to be coming to you. And renewal, you need to renew your SAM registration at least once a year. You're going to get notices from companies that want to sell you that service to do the renewal. SAM will also send you notices. I'm thinking that they start at 60 days out at least. But I always tell people, try to renew close to the time that your SAM will expire, because otherwise you're moving it up. If you get a notice today, your SAM doesn't expire for 2 months, you renew it today, this will be the renewal date next year today's date. Whatever date you renew is the date that it will be renewed next year. Now, having said that, you have to do it at least once a year. If there are material changes in your business, you need to do that when that happens, because as one of our Steve Koprinz, who's one of the contracting attorneys that was speaking at our conference yesterday, and a good friend, pointed out, every time you bid, you are telling the government that the representations and certifications, like the size of your business, the annual receipts, is accurate as of the date you submitted that information. So if you have material changes to your business, you need to make changes to your SAM more than once a year. That's the end of my presentation, Daniel. If you have any questions, I would be happy to take those.
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. We did have one question. I think Patricia might have gotten the answer here, but she just asked if I need to change the address of the business in Dunn's, is that difficult?
Probably no, it's not terribly difficult. Ordinarily, if you would get a hold of your PTAC counselor, they probably have a direct phone number to Dunn's that they can help you get that changed. But you can do it electronically. So it takes a little while to get that done, but make sure that if you moved, you do make that change.
Also, as Scott mentioned a couple times, if you do have questions about the SAM registration process or filling out your DSBS profile or any of that, or you just want somebody to kind of guide you along the process, just let us know at the PTAC, and we offer those services for free in one-on-one settings. So I'd love to get you set up with one of our consultants that can help you through the SAM registration process or the renewal process or anything like that. I put my email in the chat, so feel free to shoot me an email anytime.